Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. Week after week, Robin and I take great joy and immense pleasure in presenting to you different women from different walks of life and talk about how they are making an impact in this world, how they are investing in helping other women, and how other women are lifting them up in a way that together a community of women are making the world go in a positive way to create the kind of impact we need to, and to create the kind of upliftment we need in our society today. And I cannot wait for you to meet an amazing woman today. Robin, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so thoroughly delighted to have Kristin be on our show today. And she is actually we were referred to her from another guest on our show. And so anyone listening to this program, please know that if you know of a woman who is uplifting and strengthening and supporting other women, please contact us and we'd love to have them be a guest. But Kristin has a very, for me, a kind of somewhat unusual and dear to my heart focus in life, and that is to help people with speech problems. And I shared with her that I have an uncle, I have nephews, I have nieces with master's degrees in helping people with speech problems. But she also runs a camp called Camp Shout Out to help teens and youth with speech problems. And so, Kristin, this is for us somewhat unusual, and we're very excited to hear, how did you get into this, and how did you then turn your focus toward helping teens and children and helping women in an area who have the area of speech impediments or speech problems?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation. It's lovely to be with you this morning. I am, as you said, a speech language pathologist, and I made this decision when I was a freshman in college. And I was in an English class taught by a very special woman, and I was just facing the stuttering problem that I had grown up with. And I had sometimes we talk about people who stutter, you might see it, or it might be more internal, called covert. And I had spent the majority of my youth development avoiding situations, avoiding words, not talking as much if I thought I would stutter. So I was in this English class, and the whole class was graded on a speech. And it was one of the first times I'd given a presentation. And the teacher was a very special woman, and she sat on the desk with me, and she said, "We have to tell the class that you stutter and ask for their support." And I did that with her help and gave this speech and decided I wanted to become a speech therapist after that, and decided that I wanted to help children receive what I was not able to receive when I was a child. So that's how I got in to the field, and I am very specialized in working with stuttering and have served young girls, preschool age girls, elementary age, all the way through adult women who stutter, in helping them learn how to advocate for themselves, learn how to find their voices again, and learn how to live with or without stuttering. Mm-hmm.
That is amazing to hear, Kristin. And what is coming up for me as I hear you speak, is I grew up in the middle of a genocidal war in Sri Lanka. And it was necessary for survival to speak all three languages I spoke as if it was my native tongue, so that nobody identified my race. because the minute they identified my race based on my accent, then my life is in peril, even as a child. So I remember going for what we call elocution class, how to elocute in English, so that your diction and your pronunciation and enunciation and everything is such that you sound like a native English speaker. And so having gone through that as a child from a very survival perspective, what you do is so near and dear to my heart. And people don't realize how many different ways our speech pattern affects us. And today in the workplace, when I have immigrants who work with me who have an accent, they don't get a fair shake because people listen to people's accents or stuttering instead of what they are saying. What advice do you have for everybody around the people with either stuttering or accent or some speech impairment in terms of how to mindfully show up?
I think that one of the most important things, and something that is becoming very prominent in our field, is that individuals do have different ways of communicating, and that we need to accept and respect those ways. And one of the things that I think is very helpful as a listener is that you try to focus on connecting with the person and perhaps asking them a question, which keeps you mindful about what they are talking about rather than the manner in which they're talking. You know, I did a lot of things in my adult development to be able to communicate. The many people who stutter, the majority will go on to stutter and have that type of speech pattern. So that is what I could say. And your experience that you just shared is incredible. And it also is an example of how personal how we talk really is. And how quickly girls will shut down, will start trying to hide or mask that they have a difference in how they communicate. It doesn't fit with maybe how they look or how they want to appear, how they fit in with their peer group. And what happens over time with that kind of avoidance and fear around communicating, they stop communicating. They stop being willing to say what they want. And every time you do that, you are creating some type of imprint, right? That traumatic center in the brain of, I really can't do this. I can't communicate what I really want to say.
You know, this is really grabbing me because you talk about helping them find their voice again. And I know that with women and with girls, are throughout history have been silenced in many ways on multiple levels. And when we think of speech, we think of it as a physical action, which obviously it is. But to your point, there is so much emotion going in and out of this physical reaction. What are some of the things you do on an emotional level to help them find their voice, create more effective ways of understanding themselves, and then being able to open their voice to others?
Well, and this sort of leads into Camp Shout Out because we have many girls from around the world that attend Camp Shout Out. And one of the things we do, first of all, we keep them in the center. We keep them in the center, the person, the relationship, and listen to them and their lived experience, because everyone's lived experience is so unique. And we validate where they've been and how difficult it has been. We also help them desensitize to the feeling of stuttering, desensitize to what it's like if they do that with their speech, and learning how to become more aware and objective about it versus the whole emotional brain reacting to what's happening. And we use a lot of microphones. There is this teeny delay when you talk into a microphone that allows you to listen to your voice. We had a camper that I just talked to. I haven't talked to her in 10 years. So we're going into 15 years of Camp Shout Out. So some of these children started at the age of 9 or 10, and they went all the way through till they graduated high school. And she left me a voicemail, and I never heard her voice. She talked, but she stuttered so severely, and she's still stuttering, but I heard her voice. So we give them multiple opportunities to talk in front of who they're comfortable talking in front of. And at camp, it could be 150 people. And we want them to have pleasant experiences, as many as we can give them. So we guide and structure those demands based on what they are comfortable with and what they want and what they feel they need. So it's a very much as you said earlier, Robin, everyone is in the conversation that matters. We don't just say, okay, this is what we're going to do. So it's that's how we approach that. Mm-hmm.
It is amazing how the whole camp experience is not only empowering these girls to find their voice and speak and own their way of speaking, but also giving everybody the opportunity to hold space for each other. And the speech impediment or the speech hurdle is primarily psychology driven. There's something going on in their lives, in their thinking and in their makeup internally that also is being addressed as part of this camp. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of the scenarios that drives girls into getting stuck in this space, because research also shows that up until the age of 5, girls are as creative and bold and outgoing as boys, but the minute they turn 5, society conditions them to take a back seat, be less than, not to share their thoughts, not to share their voices, not to share their dreams, what it takes to be a good girl instead of being your own girl. How do all of this play into it? Because nothing is mutually exclusive of each other.
Well, one of the things that we know is that temperament, our biological makeup, plays a large role in how any child, any girl responds to the experiences within the home and within the environment. And I think that one of the things we know is that even young children before 5 can be aware that their talking that something is going on with their talking. And, usually by about 1st or 2nd grade, although sometimes even in preschool, other children are responding to how they talk. And maybe they're asking them, why do you talk that way? Or they're mimicking them. And so that doesn't feel good. When you have something that feels unpleasant, boy, that emotional part of our brain holds on to that. I think Rick Hansen, who's a neuropsychologist, says it's like Velcro to that which is negative, because it's there to protect you. So it sometimes only takes a few experiences, and sometimes parents are trying to help, but they're asking the child to slow down, say it again, don't stutter, and those kinds of experiences may also impact the child. So then the ball gets rolling. What is interesting to me, first of all, more boys begin stuttering than girls, and more boys keep stuttering. There's a lot of genetic things behind that. But since the pandemic, we have seen more girls in therapy. We have seen more girls come to camp than ever before. And I think that's fascinating. I think that perhaps parents were hearing their children talk during school on Zoom and realizing, wow, this is more of a challenge than we ever knew. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. We had talked before the show started a little bit about there's a genetic component to speech and speech patterns. And then, as you have aptly said, there is a home environment. How are parents responding? So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the genetic component. Obviously, there's not a lot we can do about that. But how about, in addition to that, how parents respond or tune in to their children speaking, what is helpful versus not helpful?
Sure. So there is a genetic component to stuttering. And what we look for is there anyone in the family who stutters that has continued to stutter? So has it been persistent or not? About 70 to 80% of children that begin stuttering will grow out of it. But that is usually within the first year, and that is if it starts before 3.5 years of age. So we do say now that stuttering is a neurophysiological disorder that is impacted by genetic factors as well as environmental factors. And if an individual does not grow out of stuttering, many times there's one or more diagnoses. So I think what's very helpful is for parents to understand what stuttering is. It's repeating sounds, prolonging sounds, or blocking on sounds, and then what the risk factors are for persistence, and to seek guidance from a specialist if they feel that that is the choice that they want to make. I like to talk with parents now and with girls now who stutter, especially in elementary and as they get older. Stuttering is a lived neurodiverse experience. You know, I'm neurodiverse. Many clients that I work with are neurodiverse. Stuttering usually goes with something else, perhaps ADHD, sometimes anxiety, sometimes Tourette's or OCD. And so to understand a child who is stuttering as they get older, we need to understand the big picture if we're going to help them. And as I reflect on what your podcast, relates to, the way I got into this camp was that a client's mother, who's a very successful businesswoman, called me and said, would you do a camp for kids who stutter? There's nothing like it. And this was about 18 years ago. And I was recovering from a major surgery and I was on drugs when she called me, and I said yes. And I laugh about it because part of my neurodiversity is difficulty with executive functioning. I had no idea how to direct anything, let alone a camp. But I did say I'll only do it if we include a training component so that graduate students and speech therapists could come as well, and we could all learn together. There's such a dire need for more training in this area in our field. So that was yet another woman who believed in me, and I really had absolutely no idea how to do what I jumped into.
That is such a fantastic vignette you just painted. And that is so important to hold, understand, and celebrate the women who give us the ideas, the opportunities, and kind of nudge us in the right direction. So I love the fact that you shared that. And as a speech pathologist, you're dealing with more than stuttering. There are lots of times certain illnesses and certain things that happen to women somewhere along their lifespan, they actually lose the ability to speak, including having an accident or falling down and getting a part of the nervous system paralyzed, so many different things, right? Early onset of certain neurological illnesses. How can people with those kind of situations that are not stuttering, but the loss of speech, sometimes certain illnesses, they can't hear themselves speak, so they stop speaking. How can, as a speech pathologist, you give them guidance on seeking help instead of thinking that they can never speak again?
Well, one of the things I say is that it's never too late and it's never not a good time to evolve as a communicator. And we know that the human brain is wired for connection. And one of the things that I have sort of documented as part of my work, I do teach about clinical help with stuttering all over the world, is that there are basic needs of any communicator. First, we have to feel safe. What does that mean? If I try to communicate, the person that is with me is not going to respond in a negative way. So we have to feel safe. And if we feel safe, we're going to be willing to communicate in some way. There are multiple ways of sending and receiving messages. Speech is one of those ways. And if I communicate, I'm going to make a connection, and then I might be willing to be part of a community. And so even individuals, I have done some traumatic brain injury work, not a lot, but some, when after the immediate care, when there was someone needed to help pull all these pieces together. And so we focus on things like, who do you talk to the most? What did you used to talk with your kids about? And how can we get some of this connection to start happening again? It's never too late to evolve as a communicator. And I chose that for myself, and I believe that for every person. And sometimes the way we're communicating has to change. Even bringing in other modalities like art, drawing, making things, using the sensory system is so important. And it's a loss for people when they could communicate and now they're not able to, or they have to communicate in a different way. And we also, I worked with one woman once, and she wanted to give a speech at her daughter's wedding. And even though it wasn't the speech that she would have given before she was hit by this car, we were able to get her to give a speech. And what an important experience for her and her family.
That's really beautiful. I just have to be a quick question because I know that we're running out of time, but I'm wondering, do you find that there are resistances to people being willing to accept your help, to seek help, and also to accept the guidance that you're giving them? What are the resistances that people have against you or against help?
I think one of the things that if you look at a resistance, it's just making that call. It's bringing that, being willing to say, let's bring someone in. I think that because I operate using a person-centered therapy model, it all starts with the relationship and the connection that we make. And I'm not there to tell anyone what to do. I'm there to guide and support and to help that individual recognize what really matters to me and what matters in my family, and how can I help guide you. I think another resistance now would be the social model of diversity. And I know in our field and in the world of stuttering, there are many groups now that want the society to change and society to accept stuttering, and perhaps not necessarily to help an individual learn to make talking easier. And that would be on the very kind of radical side. And I will continue until the day I die to leave that person in the center, because that person's experience has to be honored and valued. And I also believe in the importance of advocacy. You know, we have girls now that are going on podcasts in high schools and talking about their stuttering and teaching their school staff about it. And so we want to do both. And sometimes people don't want the help, and that's okay too. Mm-hmm.
That is so important to keep the person in the center, because the person needs to feel and sense, in every sense of the word, that they truly are living their own life and they're not participating in other people's lives. So I'm so glad to hear you say that. And it's amazing how time flies when we are having deeply meaningful conversations. So before we go any further, I would love for you to share with our audience how they can get a hold of you and any closing thought you have for them to take into their day and their week.
Sure. You can get a hold of me by going to our Camp Shoutout website, campshoutout.org. That's the easiest way. I'm also at Chmela Communication Center.com. And the one last thing I want to mention is that, I mean, there were many individuals that, you know, my co-director of camp is a woman. But I want to mention my mentor, June Campbell, because I met her when I was at Northwestern University as a graduate student. And all I'm going to say is she was much older than me then. My mentor, June Campbell, is continuing to come to Camp Shoutout and be a part of this program. And I feel that the way that I have operated, keeping the relationship in the center, also has applied to how we've built this program. And I think for any woman, for any girl, to identify who are your mentors and to maintain and take care of those relationships. Because as I age, the value of having that relationship to continue to guide me so I can guide these girls has been essential. So thank you.
That is a beautiful, beautiful backstory and a continuation of women investing in women you just painted there. And what a powerful way to remind all of us that we only stand on the shoulders of women who came before us. And then it behooves us to allow the younger women to stand on our shoulders so that they can reach further and go for longer. To our audience out there, you heard what Kristin just said. Whether your challenge is stuttering, any kind of speech impairment, or anything else, the solution is the same. Find the women who are going to guide you, stand on their shoulders and reach for the stars. And as you get there, allow others to stand on your shoulders so that they too can reach. And together we can build a world that we as women deserve and absolutely need to see.